Hi, I'm Angela Chang. I'm a pro fighter that lives and trains in Thailand. I actually grew up watching a lot of martial arts movies with my dad. We always rented a lot of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jean-Claude Van Damme. I just remember being fascinated with the fight choreography, and then I was like, oh, I want to learn how to do something like that. But when I told them, they're like, oh no, girls can't do that. They would say in Chinese, don't be so heavy-handed, you're a girl, you know? But the fascination with martial arts, it stayed with me. When I was working part-time in college, I had a little bit of money saved up, and I was like, you know what? Groupon exists. If I see something that interests me, I'm just gonna buy the Groupon and try it out, because why not? It just happened to be Muay Thai. It was like I love kickboxing thing, but then at the time, they were actually teaching Muay Thai. The instructors were Muay Thai fighters. This is gonna sound kind of backwards, but I suffered from various eating disorders ever since I was a teenager. And I was very unaware of it up until my early to mid 20s. And so when I started Muay Thai, I was right before I turned 20. So I was still 19, very unaware. So it was just my goal was oh, I have to get as skinny as possible. But then it slowly became oh, I want to get better. And it's not just about becoming skinny and stuff, but that was a whole process of working through a lot of stuff, and also just coming to the terms that I wasn't doing healthy things. I walked in to the gym for the first time just wanting to learn something that I've been so interested in since I was a kid. And then from there, the path just kind of unfolded itself in front of me, which was really nice because I trained and I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. So then I just kept training, and then I trained more frequently throughout the week, and then started sparring. And then shortly after that, I was like, oh, I think maybe if I compete, I will get better at this. So it was never this innate desire to compete. It was competing so I can get better. These shorts I wore for, I think, my second amateur fight. So it says Siton Gym, Angela, Aziz on it. The elastic is all gone, but I couldn't bring myself to get rid of these. These are some photos for my first two amateur fights. My friend made this calendar for me, but I'll just show you the photos. So this is from my second fight. I think also my second fight, that's me and Aziz. My first ever fight.
Wow.
First ever, yeah. This is the poster that was up at the gym. I remember after telling the coaches that I wanted to fight, it took them 6-7 months to actually get me matched up. And when we actually got to the fight venue, I was just so nervous, so nervous that I think I went through every single emotion that there was, aside from fear. The only thing that I didn't go through was fear, but it was just I was nervous and I was excited, and then I was just doubting myself. And then when I was waiting to walk out, I started hyperventilating, and I wanted to tell my coach, I was like, I can't do this. I wanted to cry. He's like, you ready? I'm like, yeah. He's like, no, louder. Are you ready? I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm ready. And then we walked out. When I walked out into the ring, I didn't even look at the crowd. I looked at the ropes, and I just focused on the ropes, because I knew if I looked down into the crowd, I would just crumble. When that first bell rang, I was like, oh, we're really here. And I think for that first round of my first fight, I held my breath. I was like, and I remember one of my corners was like, Angela, don't back up. And I think I took that a little bit too seriously, because him saying that has really molded my current style many years later. So yeah, that was that was quite an experience. Yeah, I still keep in contact with Jessica. She's really nice. This is at the casino too, at Resorts World.
Oh, the one that your parents went to.
Yeah. I remember I was about to have my first amateur fight. I was in the car with my dad, and I was like, Dad, guess what? I'm gonna fight next month. He's like, you? Fight? He's like, you're so small. You know, if you end up in the hospital, I'm not gonna come visit you. So he was just upset that I was doing it. I ended up doing it anyway, of course, yeah. And then after that, I think he was just becoming a little bit more interested in what I was doing. He actually tricked my mom into coming to my second fight with him. So it was at the casino in Queens, and then he was just like, oh, let's just go to the casino and check it out. She's like, okay. They go to the casino and they sit down, and she's like, where are you? What are you doing, right? And then I come out, and then I start fighting. And then after the fight, he was like, oh, I knew you were gonna win. That was so awesome. You know, he was excited. And then I went back to where my mom was, and she was like, I didn't watch anything. I was so scared. Yeah, she's like, I covered my eyes. He's like, don't do that again. You gave me like a heart attack. And then when I first planned to go to Thailand for 6 months, they were not having it. They're like, no, you can't go. I'm like, well, I'm gonna do it. My first few weeks there, I was training mostly with one of the older trainers. And then different people were holding for me, which is pretty normal in a Thai gym. It's just like this period where it's like, okay, we're testing these out and see how we flow together and stuff. And then like the day that Pachai held for me, I was like, oh man, I want this guy to be my trainer. Like all the other trainers were great, but he was just like, the way that we moved together, I was just like, oh, I have a lot to learn from this guy. And I really feel like his pace especially was like something that I can really use to develop my fighting. He's just been my trainer ever since. I wasn't planning on staying in Thailand for a long time. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do like 6 months in Thailand, right? And in those 6 months, I had like 7 fights, and then and I was like, okay, let me stay another 6 months. So I just kept accumulating all these fights in Thailand, and then there came a certain point where it was like, oh, well, if I go back to the U.S., like who's gonna let me fight amateur? You know, especially like when I started beating some of the top Thai girls in my weight class, I was like this might not get a lot of publicity, but the fact that I've beaten some of these people, I don't think it's right that I go back to the US and fight amateur. So at a certain point, I was just like, I guess I'm pro now. When it comes to female fighters, it's a bit difficult because I feel like in the West, they're getting actually more recognition for their achievements, especially the pros. But at the same time, there's not a whole lot of pro female fighters. In Thailand, there's just so many, it's just easier to get fights. But you're not, like the female fighters for a really, really long time weren't getting any sort of recognition. It's not just the recognition, but the fact that it shows to the time in Muay Thai industry that female fighters are profitable. Obviously, if we operated in a world where people did what they thought was morally right and they just did it, because now we're showing that these time promotions, like, hey, if you put on female fights, it doesn't mean your show is going to go kaput. It's actually, it could be profitable like it is for one championship. And when you look at someone like Stamp, right, she makes the most money out of everyone at Fairtex. So it definitely helps female fighters going forward. But there's just so many things that need to be changed on a systematic level. So I was posting a lot of my Muay Thai stuff to my personal account for a really long time. Like I said, it was never like in my grand plan to like be this pro fighter that lives in Thailand long term, you know? So I was just posting to my personal account. And at some point I was like, you know what? I think a lot of people want to see what I'm doing. And I'm also like pretty proud of what I'm doing for myself. So slowly from there, I just kind of found what was important to me, what was important to the people that were like fans of mine or fans of my content. I remember when I first started training and was like looking up fighters, I was like, oh, I wonder if there are any women fighters, right? So I was like, women Muay Thai fighters on Google. And I think the only fight I found was like Miriam Nakamoto versus Julie Kitchen, right? And that's like a classic fight. And that was the only fight I found. I'm like, that's it. And then being in Thailand, I saw that there were so many women fighting. And I was like, you know what? I'm here and these women are awesome. They're like world champions. They're fighting at a high level, like higher than any level that I've seen in the US from man or women, period. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna posting up their fight results. So that's just how I started. I just posted about, okay, this fight's coming up and then this is who won, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just how it got started. There's definitely a lot of interest from people because they're like, oh, I didn't know anything about news from the female fight community as well. So I was like, oh, okay, so this is an interest that not only that I have, but a lot of other people have. And they're like, oh, I'd never even heard of these names and stuff. I'm like, she's a world champion, like 2-time world champion. And everyone in the community needs to know her name, not just Senchai's name, not just Bolkow's name, you know? So that's really why I started doing it. So from there, I was writing articles. And then I think like a year ago, 2 years ago, I started a podcast. I hate to say it because it's not something that I want to be a reality, but for people to get opportunities, whether it's for fights or sponsorships, you have to be online. You have to be on social media and create a presence. This is a fight event I was on. It was like one of the first all-female fight events in Thailand. And I think they did like 2 shows, but they just couldn't get sponsors. This is back in like, I think 2017. One of my biggest inspirations, especially when I first started out, was Jessica Ng. She was a fighter. She had already 10 fights when I was starting out in Muay Thai, and she's even smaller than I am. And I saw her training for a fight when I think the first or second time I dropped into Seton, and I was like, wow, she's so good, and she's sparring all these people who are so much bigger than her. She's really holding her own. So I remember really looking up to her, and I try to learn from her as much as possible, and we're good friends now. So she's been a really big inspiration of mine. Some other people that have really inspired me along the way are just a lot of my training partners that are women. I think because growing up, I had interests that were very different from a lot of the girls that I grew up with, and to find a group of women within Muay Thai, we're still also different from each other, but just we can all support each other in this, and just having that support has really uplifted me. The community, yeah, I've met including you guys, I've just met so many great people from doing this sport, and so many people that I just would not meet otherwise. Because if you see all the people that do Muay Thai, they're rocket scientists or business execs, or they're just doing all these different things in life, and we all come together at this gym, and then none of that matters. We're all together. Most of us put our egos aside, and we just train together. Doesn't matter what our statuses are outside of life. And I just love the community and how most people, we really look out for each other. I've met people from all over the world doing this sport, and I really can't say the same if I stayed here and just went a conventional route.
So I want to thank Angela for joining us today, sharing her story. Angela, where can people find you?
So you can check out muay-ring.com for articles and my podcast. You can find out what I'm up to on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as Angela Sitan, Angela Sitan. And I also recently co-founded a online martial arts community for women, non-binary, and allies. And you can head over there if you're interested in joining or supporting. That's fighthers.io, FIGHTHERS.io.
And we're going to list all of that below, so make sure you guys give Angela a follow. There's going to be a lot of exciting things happening, right? So keep an eye on Angela. Thanks for checking in. Catch you guys soon.
That's it.
The pack of Pokemon cards, not related?
You want to see it? Yeah, this is I had this since I was 8. If this is not Muay Thai related, but if you want to put in my extensive Pokemon card collection.